This video is about package selection, and it's in the ERP deployment series. So we're going to look at package selection today, choosing the software to implement. Once the board approves funding, the search for the best software can start, and it will look for the best combination of functionality, affordability, user friendliness, customizability and vendor support. The project manager has the go ahead for the board and now has a budget, so these are the steps that happen at that point. The considerations during the selection process: time is money, so teams involved in ERP selection mustn't get too bogged down in spending too much time selecting the product, but just enough. And balancing the cost of selection with the need to avoid a mistake. Selection is aimed at the firm getting a successful system, clearly. If too much time is spent on selection, a system won't result at all, and an ERP system not implemented won't deliver anything. That seems fairly obvious. The key steps in the process: you start off with a market survey, looking at the different products that there are on the market and what they offer. You produce a request for information, which is sent to the vendors. You do a requirement analysis of what you want the system to do. Send out a request for proposal to the preferred suppliers, and then start narrowing down the choices. You then do a site survey with demo days and reference days, and a fit gap analysis to find out if there are any gaps in what each system offered provides. You then devise an implementation methodology. You might follow the Rumler-Brack methodology or other well-known ones. Then you get a proposal from the supplier, and then you make a decision on who's going to be chosen and do negotiations on price. So we can go through those steps. So in the market survey, you would look in the latest information services magazines, IT consultancies such as Panorama Consulting Group. There are lots of online journals that provide information about the latest products coming out. So you would look in websites, industry magazines, trade exhibitions. Vendors may also be identified via your suppliers, by talking to your customers or competitors. See what they're doing. You might look at user groups for companies like SAP or Microsoft Dynamics. So there are various sources of information to give you an idea of what you might think about putting in. A request for information, or RFI, you'll send that to the vendors, and you'll then get some information about the capabilities of their solutions and also the skills, the implementation skills that they perhaps can offer. This is not a request for a vendor to bid on the project. It just allows the field to be narrowed down before you go and look at who you might talk to in detail. Your requirements analysis is a very important stage, because obviously you want to make sure that you get a system that meets the needs of the company. So you look at your strategic goals, and you define a project scope so that you don't make it too over ambitious at the beginning. You can always have a phase 2 later on, but if you can keep it simple, then the requirements gathering and analysis phase, if it's successfully done, then you stand a good chance of having a good system on time. So the project team produces process models, business scenarios and workflows that will be the 2B system, assuming that they're moving to a completely new system, or they may move from the as is to the 2B system. So you can see the diagram there. The scope feeds in, the stakeholder expertise and advice feeds in to what is a business analysis. and then you go through the requirements writing and system development phases if you're going to develop things from scratch. But there's a lot more to it before that happens, so very important to do requirements gathering properly. And in the cartoon here we've got Wally. We don't have the time to gather the product requirements ahead of time. I want you to start designing the product anyway, otherwise it will look like we aren't accomplishing anything. And the chap later is sitting there thinking, oh, of all my projects I like the Doom ones best. So if you don't do a good requirements gathering, you will end up with a poor system. One way to list all the requirements in a kind of neat way is by using mind maps. Some of the mind maps can actually be converted into Gantt charts as well, so you can kill two birds with one stone. You can set up the phases of a project, and you can also map them so that you've got a record of all those steps. You decide what's the desired system functionality, then the processes that will be involved in targeting improvements, and how the new ERP system will improve these processes. Some elements will be standard, such as purchase orders, invoicing, that will all be expected to be in an enterprise-wide software system. Some will emerge as desirable, such as advanced planning and scheduling, and some will offer some value-added potential, business intelligence gathering, handling of IT governance, and compliance. I would expect to be built in accounting modules these days. That's one of the advantages of having an ERP system. So in the cartoon it says one of us will have to read this gigantic product requirements document, and another says unless it gets destroyed in a freak accident. And then they think about burning it so they don't have to do any of that work. But obviously that is not what you want to be doing. You then send out a request for a proposal, and that seeks quotations formally from ERP vendors. It will define the scope of the project, and it may also look at some modules that may be being installed separately. It looks at project timescales, due dates, and it will also write down criteria and weightings, which we'll talk about in a minute, and when the contract award date is going to be, when it's planned for. So you narrow down the choices from the quotations, and develop a short list of up to 3 vendors, or it might be a couple of vendors with a number of products. The project team should focus on must-have features, nice-to-have features, and bells and whistles, and kind of categorize them like that. Future functionality promised by vendors should be ignored. If it's not available now, then there's no guarantee you will actually get it, because that may not materialize. When you come to do the selection criteria is shown here. So there's a weighted score sheet, and how this works is you list all the things that the ERP system or the enterprise-wide software system you'd like it to offer, or you've identified the options that they can all offer these elements, such as manufacturing functionality, financials functionality that can deal with those functional areas. And then you have set an importance. So the most important is 3, between 1 and 3. So 1 is least important, 3 is most important. And then you define a rating between 1 and 10 for each of the 3 vendors that you're going to put in your comparison. And notice that like in the first line, manufacturing functionality, its importance is 3, so it's very important, and its rating is 8, so that's quite high. 3 times 8 gives you 24. That's the weighted rating for that parameter. And then you add all those up, and at the bottom you get a total. and the highest score is what you want to. That will be the one that you'll probably pick. So that's a way of making it easier to pick out one system from another, because they all have very complex features. Then you undertake a site survey, invite each vendor to meet the team on site, and you look at the functional requirements of the buyer, the peculiarities of the business. So that's if you're kind of quoting that project to someone. The project team can ask if similar projects were done previously. Best practice is only that if it's based on previous experience, so otherwise it can't really be classed as best practice. But generally the ERP vendors have done lots of industries and now know how to do them very well. You still got to watch out for that they aren't learning on your time. So the site survey gives you confidence and also highlights flaws that there might be. You can then have demo days, so the vendor would come in and demo how the key business processes work. So there might be an agenda for that. You review to make sure that it's valid, it's what you are expecting, and it should be complete in one day. You don't want to be going to a vendor and for a second time. It all costs money. It's going to increase the cost of the project. On the other hand, you do want to get a meaningful demo day done. You have the weighted score sheet used to rate the demo as well, so you might have a special one for that. So the demo should cover things like security. It should look at how secure the system is, how well the menus and navigation work, how customizable it is, how easy it is to create reports out of the system, and how easy it is to enlist help and support. And try and get the vendors talking to you, because you're going to have a close relationship with them over a reasonable period. So you need to also finding out about them and how easy they are to work with. Vendors should demonstrate similar elements so you can compare them apples with apples in each area. So that's where the weighted score sheet helps. The project team should evaluate if the vendor has applied their solution to the company's business processes, offered the right functionality, flexibility, fit, the price is right, they're not being overcharged for customized items, which makes it a lot more expensive than it really looks at first glance, and provide a good maintenance and upgrade path. And the last thing is you show how customizations can be re-added after upgrades, because an upgrade will take out custom functionality that's been added. The vendor's technology strategy should be examined. Does it fit with the technologies that the company plans to use, your company? A vendor that uses different technology may not fit the project. And is the vendor committed to successful implementation, go live, or are they kind of remote? What support will the vendor provide, when, and at what cost? So these are things you also have to think about in relation to demo days. Then you can choose a winner out of those. So you choose a vendor, and you're using your demo day notes, this weighted score sheet, and meetings with the different process owners, department heads, and the board, and then a primary bidder is chosen. The team visits a like customer site suggested by the winning bidder. So you go to a customer. You can also benchmark other companies that are using the software. The reference visit should be with firms of about the same size, so you're getting that kind of idea of, yes, it can cope with your size of business. And ideally it should be running on the same hardware platform as you plan to use. So there are some things to think about when you're doing a reference visit to make sure that you're getting a representative picture of how this software you're thinking of having might work, or does work at another company. So reference visit questions. Is the software right sized for our business? Does it meet the industry need that we have? Does it function or work as hoped? Is the look and feel suitable? When the people you've gone to reference, you can ask them, was that project done on time? Was the implementation done well? Was the project on budget? Is the vendor a good partner to work with? And is there some reasonably priced local support? So you get that company's feeling about what the software vendor is like to deal with and their product. Fit gap analysis is an important element, because what you're trying to do is work out what gaps there are in what the software can provide. And if you find that suddenly your primary supplier, the one you've chosen, has more gaps than perhaps you'd realised, you may need to revisit the choice that you made. So you'll then have an implementation methodology discussion. Will the vendor third party be helping the implementation? What's the agreed scope, roles and responsibilities of the company? What's the implementation methodology? Which one are you going to follow? What are the deliverables that will indicate success? So how do you know if you've actually reached the point where you can say you're achieving success? What staff will be involved from the vendor? We don't want junior staff working on a complex project, even though that has happened in cases like Fox Mayer, for example. When will the list of services and statements of work be ready? So you can actually plan the project, and obviously should be planning the project with a full work breakdown structure showing the work packages that are going to be done involved in putting the system in. And you can use, if it's an SAP system, you can use SAP Project Builder to create that. You can also have a project responsibility chart, which is shown in the center of this slide. It's a very good way of identifying work breakdown structures and allocating them to what their role of each work package is and who is involved. So that under the responsibility, you've got the project manager, the officer, and various other people who are involved in the project. And you can also use Microsoft Project or one or the other. And there's a sort of download there where you can go and look at notes on that. So now you have the vendor proposal. It should include agreed modules in the scope. The company may buy more modules if expansion is planned, but you don't want to increase the size of it if you can help it. Better discounts may be available at the start of the relationship. So things like annual fees. You may be able to get a multi-year contract at a lower price. You might get maintenance thrown in if you buy another part of their software. You've got to think about project phases and agreed cost limits for each phase if you don't want the cost to be spiraling out of control. And then decision and negotiations. So here we've got surveys and bids going on, visits and demos, the fit gap analysis and proposals. This is the kind of package selection decision element that you will go through when you're choosing the winner. So you pay for the software. Implementation schedules should define the incentives and penalties. Incentives for early completion of certain project stages, penalties for overrunning. Then you settle all the terms and conditions that apply, and make sure that you've got ideally the project on your terms and conditions, though that may not always be possible. one thing to look at is not to focus short term, but to think, of an ERP system as a long term deal. It's one of the things that it's very difficult to see how software as a service ERP, how it can make use of the benefit of stopping to pay the subscription and then starting it later, because you'll lose all your data out of the system if you're no longer paying the subscription for a while. So that's one thing that always makes me wonder about that kind of thing. So the next steps in an ERP project, we then move on to installation and configuration, customization and interfacing, testing and training, the management of change, the implementation of the ERP system. Then there's the go live event where everything's ready and in theory you've done all the testing you need, and operation and maintenance, followed by upgrading and replacement. So that's the end of this briefing on ERP package selection. So we'll come back to this looking at the next stage in the next video. So thank you very much.